Breaking news: Putin leaves Moscow and some interesting facts have surfaced about the dictator's real whereabouts. A triple deception. The Kremlin tried to hide it, but failed. The residences came under threat. Fierce drones reached them as well. Putin was genuinely frightened. It seems there is no safe place for the Kremlin's chief in Russia, and all the cunning schemes have been exposed. The first details. You need to hear this now. The secrets of Putin's offices. It turns out that the Russian dictator goes to great lengths to hide where he actually is and from where he runs the country.
For the past 10 years, we've constantly seen Putin in this very office. A bright, functional office of 120 square meters is located on the second floor of the new representative building in Novo Ogaryovo. Outside the window, there's 1.5 kilometers of forest. You can't just peek inside from the street. That's where Putin makes important calls, holds video conferences, and meets with people. And for almost the entire pandemic of 2020 to 2021, according to Kremlin reports, Putin worked exactly there. Or did he?
After reviewing dozens of hours of the program Moscow, Kremlin, Putin, the Kremlin website archives, government procurement documents, building plans, routes of movement for Putin and his entourage, as well as hotel bookings and business trips of state TV employees, journalists from the System project discovered that since 2015, exact replicas of the suburban office have been created for the dictator in order to conceal his actual location at any given moment.
The Kremlin uses these replicas to create the impression that Putin is working in the Moscow suburbs. In reality, most of the footage supposedly from the Moscow suburbs was filmed in decoy offices farther from Moscow.
At present, it is known that there are at least 3 completely identical offices in different parts of Russia. In the Moscow suburb of Novo Ogaryovo, the Sochi residents of Bukhar, Fruchein and Navaldayan. Each of them replicates the original interior down to the smallest details. The color of the walls, the arrangement of the furniture, and the decorative elements, so that viewers cannot tell one room from another. The nested system of twin offices allowed the dictator to record addresses and hold meetings from different parts of the country, creating the illusion of stability and constant presence in the same office. Despite the apparent identicalness of the rooms, journalists discovered small but telling differences. The height of the door handles, the lines on the walls, and the arrangement of folders on the desk. It was these details that became the key to exposing the carefully concealed deception.
By drawing 2 lines, we can confidently say which room Putin is using. Here is the new Ogaryovo. And here is the copy office. And again, here is the original. And here is the copy.
Since February 2023, Putin has almost stopped using the Sochi office after he began to fear Ukrainian drone strikes. The Bukharov-Ruche residence, once convenient and secure, turned out to be vulnerable, and the dictator began looking for more hidden and protected places to work.
Despite the fact that several air defense positions have been set up there, it's still close enough to Ukraine, and the long-range capabilities of the Ukrainian drone forces allow them to stage
a lot of weddings there. That's why Valdai is farther away. It's better hidden, and the topography there is better. Well, it's in the forest, it's a residence in the woods. And in Sochi, it's a residence in the mountains, in a fairly open area. But it has a view, you know? That is, when you build yourself a residence with a view, so you can see both the mountains and the sea. It's not just that you can see the sea, but you can also be seen a bit from the sea. That's why Sochi dropped out of both of his favorite residences. Since
the beginning of 2025, the same fate befell the suburban office in Novo Ogaryovo. Now, Putin's addresses and meetings are recorded in 2 different offices, one in the Kremlin and one at Lake Valdai in the Novgorod region. That's where another office was set up. Journalists claim that the Valdai residence has become the main home for Putin's secret family, officially established with the woman named Alina Kabayeva. There, the dictator could hold meetings in private and record addresses, passing them off as footage from the Moscow region residence.
It also has its own distinguishing features. The first is the switch. It is located exactly in the center of the panel, not like in the original Novo Ogaryovo or in the copy in Sochi. The second is the seam on the wall, the one right behind Putin's head. It is located much higher than the panel joint. This office has its own writing set, its own distinctive pattern on the desk. And in general, we found more than 150 photos of this office, but that's just among those we were able to identify. Let's once again show how the 3 rooms differ from each other. In all 3 rooms, the seam on the wall behind Putin is at a different height. This is how the positions of the door handles differ. And this is how the thermostats are positioned in the different locations. And this is what the desk and the folder for papers look like.
Analysis of video materials and movement routes showed that, despite the appearance of working in Novo Ogaryovo, Putin could actually have been in any of the three mentioned offices. Journalists have recorded how, in a single day, the Russian leader appears in an office with one type of renovation, then a few hours later in another, and then again in the previous one.
Since around 2018, there has been a process of absolute merging of the president's personal physical comfort, his actual body, with state necessity. In other words, the king's body ceases to be a human body and becomes a vast state hyperobject. Within it, clinics appear, secret residences, a second family, so to speak, emerges, not in parallel with the first wife, but as a separate development. And all of this no longer works in the sense of, let's at least pretend that the president follows the rules, performs the ceremonies, but rather, let's build everything in such a way that the president is simply comfortable.
And while the Kremlin creates an appearance of stability and power, in reality, the Russian dictator is afraid. He is afraid of Ukrainian attacks, afraid of losing power, afraid of any signs of instability.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The Kremlin is coming apart at the seams. Factories that for years supplied the army with equipment now sit idle, dead weight. Tanks and armored vehicles are gathering dust, and the front risks being left without the most essential supplies. Putin's war machine is starting to stall. The economy is cracking, budgets are empty, and grand ambitions are crashing against cold reality. Everything the dictator has built is falling apart before our eyes. And this is only the prologue to the catastrophe. What will happen next, and how will it all end for Russia? Don't miss all the details coming up in just a moment.
We must not only keep up with the global economy, but constantly strive to outpace its dynamics thanks to our own potential.
But in Russia, there is no sign of any dynamics or potential. In particular, even the most resilient are starting to collapse. For example, the Russian military giant Uralvagonzavod, which produces armored vehicles and enjoys all the privileges of the military-industrial complex, can't withstand the pressure and is coming apart at the seams.
What is the plant management doing? They don't formally lay people off, but instead switch them to a 4-day work week with a 20% pay cut.
Or you might say,
a 3-day work week with a 40% pay cut. This is exactly the situation that's happening. But even this is no longer helping. And this stage has already happened. According to the latest statistics, about 250,000 people in Russia have been working like this recently.
But even reducing shifts to a minimum is no longer working. At the enterprise that is the flagship of Russian tank manufacturing, there will be layoffs. This was reported by the Russian publication E1. In some departments, up to 50% of the staff is planned to be laid off, but across the entire enterprise, every 10th employee will lose their job.
Previously, it was somehow the case that civilian production might not have been very profitable, but there was a lot of money in the military sector, and it somehow made up for it. But now it seems that even orders for military products are decreasing, and it appears that Rollwagon can no longer cover the losses in the civilian sector with its military income. That's why now, in the civilian production sector, they're going to lay people off, reportedly about 10%.
Experts explain that the reason for all this is the incredible collapse of the Russian economy. Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, which are depriving the Russian Federation of millions in petrodollars, Western sanctions, and increased pressure from the US on Russia's oil sector have already led to a situation where even the negative forecasts for the economy are inaccurate. Things will get even worse.
Negative forecast from the central bank is probably a GDP decline of 2.5 to 3.5%, inflation at 12%, and an interest rate of 20%. In other words, they will have to raise the rate back to 20% next year. And this is their negative scenario, which I don't even consider negative. This is just the current reality. That's the point. The thing is, the accumulated problems just keep surfacing every day. And they prevent the central bank from maintaining the scenario it considers manageable.
The situation has escalated to the point where the decline of the Russian economy is now being publicly acknowledged.
The question is this enough? Is this what we wanted?
In fact, even according to official data, a recession has already occurred in 19 out of 24 sectors of the Russian economy. Moreover, they are now even starting to have problems with defense, with their military industrial enterprises. These enterprises are already experiencing non-payments. They are not being paid from the budget, and work weeks are being reduced, as is the case with Uralvagonzavod, for example. This means their funding was cut about 3 months ago, so these processes are actually happening.
At the same time, the most interesting thing is that in the Russian Federation, they've already come up with a way to present this information to the higher-ups. It's all modeled after things like negative growth and unsuccessful successes. So now, they are openly talking about the economic decline. At the same time, they add that previously there was such unprecedented growth that it simply couldn't last forever. So now we're seeing a decline. That's
their strategy. To say that there is no recession, no economic decline, and then release a story that maybe in the fourth quarter there will be an economic downturn, and to cover all of this with a bunch of disclaimers.
the solution suggested itself to once again revise the budget draft. Of course, in the direction of negative growth.
We are currently holding a comprehensive and extensive series of important meetings regarding the main and most significant financial document of the country, which is considered its primary and top priority.
And the priority, as before, remains the war, so they advise not to expect any improvement in analytics. And if the cuts have already affected the industrial giants of the defense industry, all enterprises in the country are next in line, including private ones. That's all from me for now. This was Darina Hatsakalo with you. Even more hellish news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you!